I'm Saraya Wintersmith. Tonight on Greater Boston, hundreds of biotech industry leaders are pushing back against a federal judge's decision to overturn the FDA's decades-old approval of an abortion pill. We'll hear from two of those leaders ahead. Then, 10 years after the marathon bombings, a look at how Boston created makeshift memorials to process the attack and honor the victims, and where all of those notes, medals, and sneakers and signs are now. When a Texas judge ruled to overturn the 23-year-old FDA approval of the abortion pill mifepristone, he not only further restricted abortion access across the country, but also plunged the pharmaceutical industry into uncertainty. The Biden administration plans to appeal before the Supreme Court, but opponents say if the ruling is upheld, it could challenge the very foundation of drug oversight and development in this country. This threat prompted more than 400 leaders in the drug and biotech industry to issue a statement condemning the ruling and warning, quote, if courts can overturn drug approvals without regard for science or evidence or for the complexity required to fully vet the safety and efficacy of new drugs, any medicine is at risk for the same outcome as mifepristone. What does that mean for other medications that people rely on every day? And what about the companies researching and developing new drugs, many based in and around Boston? I'm joined now by two people whose names are on the industry condemnation statement: Peter Pitts, president and co-founder of the Center for Medicine in the Public Interest and a former associate commissioner of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and Donna LaVoie, president and CEO of LaVoie Health Science, a strategic communications firm in the health and science space based here in Boston. Peter Pitts, Donna LaVoie, thank you so much to both of you for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it, the opportunity to talk about this.
Peter, I'll start with you. Just tell me what your immediate reaction was to hearing that a judge had essentially paused FDA approval of a drug.
Well, after they picked me up off the floor, I recognized that this really wasn't exclusively about anybody's position, be it pro-life or pro-choice. It's really about the future of healthcare and healthcare innovation in the United States. If this ruling stands, and I don't think that it will, innovation will cease. Consumers, patients, and healthcare professionals will lose faith in the FDA, and we'll be in a very bad place.
Donna, I want to bring you in and note that a representative for one of the plaintiffs in the case, Dr. Christina Francis, heads the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists. She told Vanity Fair in a piece today that they are not challenging the FDA's approval process overall, just the approval of this specific drug. Tell us about how this ruling undermines the FDA administration's authority overall, in your view.
Overall, for the biopharma industry, as you know, in Massachusetts is one of the key states in the United States, sort of really driving the sector, where we see hospitals, scientific institutions, and companies coming together, and as a total represent over 15% of the development going on in this country, which is a quite large number, not to mention the economic impact. From a job standpoint, we have over 170,000 employees dedicated to this sector. But let's talk about the most important thing, which is patient access, and patient access to medicines, all very important medicines, both that are on the market today and ones that are currently in development. I think that there's where the biggest risk is.
I think that, one of the issues here, too, is not only access, but science. The Texas court challenged the FDA's scientific review process and disagreed with their decision. And that's completely beyond the jurisdiction of a court. In 2014, in Massachusetts, during the opioid epidemic, Governor Patrick tried to pull the drug Zohydra, which is a powerful opioid, off of the market. And a Boston district court judge said, opioid epidemic notwithstanding, it was outside of the governor's jurisdiction. You can't do that. This is exactly the same thing. When you challenge the direct authority of the FDA to make scientific decisions relative to safety and efficacy of drugs and biopharmaceuticals, it should be a pretty clear-cut legal decision. But the courts have been quirky, and you don't always want to put all your eggs in the smart basket. Crazy things can happen, and I think that we've got to be aware that even though there's only one drug under debate today, others could be under debate tomorrow. And if a judge can allow a state to pull a drug off the market, Another judge might say that a state can put a drug on the market that the FDA doesn't approve. It leads to all sorts of extremely dangerous places.
I'm glad you raised that point. I think I can't look at the situation without thinking about the confusion and the uncertainty just of the COVID-19 pandemic. What concerns is this decision prompting for you when it comes to public confidence in the FDA?
One of the things that we should have learned from our recent pandemic experience is that when you allow emotion and religion and politics to supersede science, people get confused, and their immediate reaction is to lose faith in the government organizations that are tasked to do the right thing, whether that's the FDA or the CDC or state health departments. And when people don't know where to turn, they turn to social media, where, of course, everything is true and it's never wrong. Patients need to be reminded that the sources of the truth, the sources of the science, the sources of trust are places like the FDA and the CDC and their local doctors, not a chat group on social media.
Donna, we know from research that it's very expensive to move a drug from lab to market. A recent report from business consultants at Deloitte outlined that among the top 20 biopharma companies in the world, the average cost of developing a new drug now sits somewhere around $2.3 billion. How might this ruling play into the bottom line for medical research and development, particularly here in Boston? It's a hub, like you said.
Yeah. No, we all know that these companies have an insatiable appetite for capital. And, we're right now in a very uncertain economic climate from a capital market standpoint. We've had in 2022, as well as just now in the first quarter of 2023, a very slow number of companies to go public. And if you think about what you just mentioned, is the insatiable appetite from a cost standpoint to develop these products and the failure rate. We've got to ensure for future access that we're continuing to fund the sector. And this kind of move also impacts the way capital markets think about the sector and the opportunity for investing, which puts, it all goes back to economics and patient access.
It sure does. The failure rate in drug development is extremely high. And, what developers and the venture capitalists that fund them are looking for is some degree of predictability. And the key aspect of predictability right now is the regulatory process, the FDA. And when you take that out of the equation, money is simply not going to go into the industry, as Donna said, but it's also not going to go into riskier areas of the industry, orphan diseases, pediatric diseases. You're going to find drug makers playing it safe. And that's not really a good sign for breakthrough innovations that we're seeing today in areas like ALS and Alzheimer's and such. We have to keep the innovation spirit alive. And this ruling throws a big bucket of cold water right on top of it.
Two harder questions now that I have to ask both of you. I read that the FDA just this month withdrew approval of a drug which was supposed to safely reduce the risk of preterm birth among women with a history of that. It's a drug that was approved under the agency's accelerated approval pathway, and yet that decision has now been reversed. I don't think that either of you would say that the FDA's processes are foolproof, but is it time, in the interest of bolstering public confidence, to add a layer of oversight to the agency? Either of you first.
The drug that's being withdrawn was withdrawn because it didn't work. When a drug is approved by the FDA via the accelerated approval pathway, it's a conditional approval, which means that the FDA is going to allow the drug to be used. They're going to look at the data as to what happens in the real world, and then make its judgment as to whether the drug gets full approval or whether it's yanked off the market. That's the right thing to do. You want to give patients access to drugs, but you also have to understand what's happening out there in the real world. In this case, the FDA monitored the drug as it said it was going to do. The data showed the drug was not effective. The FDA withdrew the drug, which is exactly the pathway that's supposed to happen relative to an accelerated approval project.
Donna?
Yeah, I would just add to that is very simply put, if you think about the FDA's, what they're there to do, which is to assess benefit over risk. And as Peter said, whether that's at time of approval or in post-approval processes, I mean, that is their job. You know, we can debate whether that should have happened for that particular product, but I think you really need to go back to what the FDA's, what they're there for, and the importance of having that oversight from a risk-benefit standpoint.
Right, and this science is very complicated. The last time most Americans touched science, including elected members of Congress and judges, was in high school when we were dissecting frogs, and there was a right answer and a wrong answer. Regulatory science has tremendous nuance and enormous gradations of black and white and gray. So when you talk about oversight, the FDA's review process is incredibly complicated. Hundreds of people touch every single application. They're highly trained and highly educated and very dedicated to their jobs. So when you say oversight, in my mind, I see lay members of Congress or judges trying to make decisions for which they are simply not qualified to do. So you have to be very careful about what that means.
Excellent. Peter Pitts, Donna LaVoie, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
On Monday, tens of thousands of runners will lace up for the 127th running of the Boston Marathon, 10 years since two bombs went off at the finish line, killing 8-year-old Martin Richard, 23-year-old Lindsay Liu, and 29-year-old Crystal Campbell, and injuring, and in many cases maiming, 300 others. In the days after the attack, makeshift memorials popped up to pay tribute to the victims as the city tried to process what happened. A decade later, Adam Riley takes a look at where all of the notes, medals, sneakers, and signs are now.
The outpouring of support and solidarity felt overwhelming to me as someone who is a Bostonian, and overwhelming in a good way, in a way that we felt very supportive. But the sheer volume is always still, I feel kind of taken aback by it.
10 years ago, a temporary memorial sprang up on Boylston Street right after the Boston Marathon bombings. If you could think of an object that conveyed grief or sympathy, the temporary memorial had it, from flowers to stuffed animals to running shoes with messages emblazoned on them. Also, an avalanche of drawings, cards, and notes.
This is an example of banners or posters that were left. And something we see here that was also typical are messages that were directed to either a specific group of people or individuals.
Later, the memorial was moved to Copley Square before being taken down in June. Now, many of those items are being stored in perpetuity in West Roxbury at the Boston City Archives.
The oldest record in here is from 1634. One of the decisions that we made was to not snatch everything up right away and bring it to the archives, because this was a memorial that was a memorial first, and so it had a function, right? It was a place in Boston where people went to grieve, to remember, to leave messages, and you can see the evidence of that. On these posters, you can see how long this spent in the elements, out in the sun. You can see how it's faded, so you can see this probably was out there for at least a month in the weather. I think it was quite a surreal experience for us, because we're certainly used to bringing records into the archives, but we're usually working with records that we have some distance of time. And these were records documenting a historical event that we had all lived through.
In 2014, some of the memorial items in the archives collection were displayed in an exhibit at the Boston Public Library. But in the years since, people's interest in seeing them has dwindled.
In the first 3 to 4 years, we would have maybe 3 to 5 requests for this collection per year. I would say in the past 5 years, we get about 1 request a year. At first, we had a lot of requests from people with personal connections to the memorial who wanted to look at them for personal reasons. Now we have people looking at them more for purposes of academic research, people who are researching community trauma, community grief, the phenomenon of temporary memorials.
You help people get access to these materials. Are there any of them that, even a decade on, for you, pack extra power or impact when you see them?
I think that something that always jumps out to me is just the sheer volume of people who left messages, and people who were not necessarily from Boston. Because the marathon is such an international event, a national event, I think a lot of people felt a connection to this. We plan to keep these records permanently. So in 20, 30, 40, 100 years, someone doing research on this memorial would come to the city archives. They're public records. They belong to the people of Boston. So anyone who wants to access these records can. Just have to call us or email us. People are always welcome to come in, and we have a lot of open appointments.
For more on the impact of the makeshift memorial, I'm joined now by Rainey Tisdale, a museum consultant who, a year after the bombings, featured many of those items in an exhibit at the Boston Public Library called Dear Boston, Messages from the Marathon Memorial. Rainey Tisdale, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Saraya. How are you?
All right. Take me back to your urge to create the Dear Boston Memorial 1 year after the marathon attack.
Yeah, sure. We knew, and I actually worked with Marta, who you just saw in that video. We knew after the bombing that the makeshift memorial was important to the city, and that the process of creating that memorial had been meaningful for many people. And so we also knew that the 1 year anniversary of the bombing was going to be an important moment in the city, and a moment of making meaning, processing the experience of the bombing, and also looking towards the future. How did we want to turn a corner as a city? And so it felt right to exhibit this collection and to organize it and exhibit it in a way that would help people process their feelings and their memories from the bombing, and have this public conversation about what do we want to take away from this. And so it was this process of reviewing the entire collection and choosing the pieces that felt like they had the strongest meaning, and organizing them in a way that we could understand what that memorial was trying to say, how Bostonians were using it and to express their feelings.
I want you to say some more about that, because I know you wrote a piece in 2017 for the Exhibition Journal for Museum Professionals, and the piece was about leading with emotion before you start to put together an exhibit, but you didn't do that until 2017, and the bombing happened before that. So how did you go about trying to organize the pieces?
Sure. Yeah, emotion is always important for curation, for the process of curating, because emotion makes meaning stick, makes learning stick, and so it's something that, throughout my career I've cared about, what is the emotion in this material I'm working with, and how do I bring it to the surface, and how do I present objects in a way that will help people contend with, both intellectually and also, emotionally will contend with the topic. And so in this collection, the emotion was so at the surface and so raw and present, more so than any other collection I've worked with. And I was thinking about it too within, there's this concept, I've done a lot of work with city history over the course of my career, and there's this concept I think about a lot, which is the emotional barometer of a city. This idea that, there are a lot of days where people are going through the course of their day and they might be feeling things on an individual level. But then there are these important days where really an entire city is feeling something together. And certainly the experience of the bombing was one of those days for Boston, where the emotional barometer hit this really deep dip, right? Mm-hmm. There are also times when that emotional barometer can be extremely positive. It could be, I think about when the Red Sox won the World Series. I think about, the first day of spring when an entire city feels alive and you can go outside without your shirt on. Without your coat on.
Not that.
Right. And so, knowing how important that is to the experience of a city and to the way we live together in a city, it was something that was really mattered in terms of working with this collection, to understand what Bostonians were feeling in terms of this bombing, and then to create an exhibit that would help them move through those feelings and have a safe space to express them, to process them, and then also, though, to move out of the rawness of it and be able to kind of turn the corner and move forward. And so we were intentionally designing the exhibit as a tool for Bostonians to do that.
I'm so glad that you raised that point. The mayor of Boston this week said that the city worked really hard with the survivor community to make sure that as we mark the decade anniversary, there's appropriate space for the solemnity, but also appropriate space for joy and forward looking. I just wonder, have you, in thinking about approaching the 10-year anniversary, have you thought about ways that you would recommend people make space for both of those things?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Saraya. And I do think that there's space for both and there's a need for both. I think that's human. And so I think here at the 10-year anniversary, a lot of time has passed. And for some people, this feels like just yesterday. And particularly the closer you were to that event, if you are a survivor, or family, loved one of a survivor, there is, it still may feel really, really close, right? And then for many Bostonians, it really has passed here at 10 years, and a lot of folks in the city have moved on. And then I think we also have to remember that there are plenty of people who live in Boston now who weren't here during the bombing and have a very different experience of the city, who came later. Cities are always changing, right? And so, the need to make space for all of those different ways of contending with this event. And then, another thing I would say is that we are right here at the 10-year mark. We are experiencing the present turn into the past. Mm-hmm. We're experiencing the present turn into history, and as more time passes. And so I think that that changes how we see this event, and we need to make space for, the whole experience of that collective emotional barometer to keep on moving for the city. I think that that's just, that's a natural part of being human and living together, sharing space together.
Rainey Tisdale, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For more of GBH's coverage of the 127th Boston Marathon, go to wgbh.org/news/Boston-marathon. That's it for tonight, but come back tomorrow for Talking Politics. A new poll shows many Massachusetts residents are thinking about moving somewhere else. What could Beacon Hill do to make them stay? Plus, how town meetings and direct democracy could change politics for the better. That and more tomorrow at 7. Thanks for watching. I'm Saraya Wintersmith. Good night.
Now, it might not be that shocking to see a bear climbing around in a tree, but you might be surprised to find out that that tree is right here in Massachusetts. Yes, bears are emerging from their long winter's nap all across the Bay State right now, so it is the perfect time to brush up on our bear safety best practices. The American black bear has called New England home for thousands, if not millions of years. But by the 1970s, estimates had their numbers at less than 100 here in Massachusetts. Now, there are 4,000 to 5,000 of them, and in March and April, they all have the same thing on their minds.
Bears are driven to find food. They haven't eaten anything for 4 to 5 months, so they're extremely hungry.
In early spring, nature's best offering is something called skunk cabbage, which is about as good as it sounds. But as bears push further east into Massachusetts and into more populated places, they are increasingly finding an alternative, the human backyard.
Just out of the corner of my eye out the side window, saw movement and just looked over here and realized There's a giant bear in the tree. We've seen bears in the area before, but the first time openly in the yard, just hanging out and enjoying a nice snack.
So we brought in the state's foremost bear expert to learn why Jillian's house might have been attractive to bears and find out what you can do to avoid a bear visit to your home.
Habitat configurations like this, where you have houses within forest blocks, are very common. There's a wetland in a forested area across the street. Those are natural habitats that the bear's going to use. That's the big challenge we have, is trying to get people to learn what they need to do around their home to coexist with bears.
Exhibit A, the humble bird feeder.
There's no such thing as a bird feeder. A bird feeder is a wildlife feeder.
Okay. Exhibit A, the humble wildlife feeder.
It's thousands of calories. So I've heard estimates that it's like 4 cheese pizzas worth of food right there. And there's a bird feeder that's that many calories. There's another one. If they go 3 houses down, there's another one. And quite often when the bear empties one, someone refills it again the next day.
They must have a really good sense of smell. I can't smell anything. A smell even I can't miss is a backyard barbecue, and bears can detect the feast even after it's over. Grease traps and dirty grill grates can bring out the beast.
Clean up those sources of food.
So the party in the backyard where everybody was eating and you're like, nah, we'll get it tomorrow.
You may have a visitor overnight.
Backyard chicken coops have become increasingly common in recent years, providing bears with yet another place to go looking for a meal.
You can't build a coop that can keep a bear out. They can just crack into it like an egg. So we're trying to really encourage the public to use electric fencing to protect their chickens.
And it's not just in cartoons that bears like honey, so you'll want to keep those beehives behind an electric fence too. Bears might get into your compost pile, but it's not a favorite. More attractive, tasty bags of trash. So A+ for this.
A+ for this. This is what we like to see.
Yeah.
They're in there, they're in a can where the bears can't access it. And then the recommendation is putting it out the morning of trash pickup so that it's not out overnight and bear can easily knock over that trash can, get into it.
Keep in mind that all of this is not just about protecting your property.
If bears learn to try to find food around their homes, it often ends up badly for the animal. People will often tell us, like, I don't mind having the bear in my yard or at my bird feeder. But that same bear that's now learned to find food in your yard goes across town and breaks into someone's chicken coop and the person shoots it.
Of course, despite our best efforts, a bear encounter is always a possibility. Now, in general, bears are not naturally aggressive towards humans, but
it's important to remember that they are a large and powerful animal, and so you want to respect that. You don't want to try to get closer to get a better picture or get a selfie or what have you. Enjoy the sighting, but do it from a distance.
I was definitely having a conversation through the glass with the bear.
what were you saying to him?
I think along the lines of good morning, hope you're enjoying your breakfast.
Do you kind of hope he comes back at some point?
There's
just between
certainly
you and me.
between you and I, yeah, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I would too. If you like wildlife, check out this video where we answer the burning question, do birds have a sense of smell? Nailed it. Perfect. Cut it, print it.
On episode 3 of La Frontera